Hello everyone, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today we are going to talk about a science fiction classic, one of my favorite stories. It is the Veldt by Ray Bradbury, which was published most famously in the book The Illustrated Man. But we'll talk about that in just a second. It was actually first published in the Saturday Evening Post, and it was called The World the Children Made. This is a big magazine. And it was on page 26. It was the September 23rd, September 23rd of 1950. Is when this was first published, and here you can see the cool illustration that went along with it. I'll also put it up to the side here. But yes, this is where it first came out. The title was changed to the Veldt, and a year later it came out in The Illustrated Man, which I think is Ray Bradbury's most famous collection of short stories. I mean, all of them are really famous, but this one I think is the most well-known. This is my first edition. I think it's a fourth or fifth printing. Really good condition on this one. I'm happy to have it. All right. So, the basic premise of this story is that the Hadley family lives in an automated house. It's called a Happy Life Home. And basically, this house is... I love these 1950 imaginings of what the future is going to be like. They live in a home that is completely automated, cooks their food, literally rocks them to sleep at night. They're sucked up through flumes into their sleeping quarters in a very Jetsons way. They are just completely cared for by this house. And the children spend their time in a nursery that is basically the earliest version of virtual reality that I've read. Now, I am separating virtual reality from the concept of the Matrix, although that is a virtual reality as well. In that one, the person is hooked up to a machine, and the machine is creating a reality in their brain. When I speak about virtual reality, in this sense, I'm thinking of a place where you go and a room or a headset creates a reality so real that you can't tell the difference between it and reality. And this room does exactly that. The children's nursery basically creates whatever they're imagining in this room. So if they're thinking about Alice in Wonderland, Wonderland appears. And if they're thinking about Peter Pan and Wendy and Neverland, then that appears. And I just want to add at this moment that Ray Bradbury very brilliantly names the children Peter and Wendy. So the husband's name is George, the wife's name is Lydia, and the children are Peter and Wendy. And that is obviously a nod to Peter Pan and Neverland, and really actually connects well with the original title, The World the Children Made, because that's exactly what Neverland is. And this is kind of a scientific Neverland for the children. And I believe probably the earliest mention of virtual reality in science fiction. I know just because of the conversation that we've been having in the comments over the Lawrence Manning, The Man Who Awoke book, that there are earlier mentions of machines or gods creating different worlds. But I think this is the first time we see holodeck style virtual reality in science fiction. The holodeck in Star Trek first was mentioned in the animated series, which was basically a continuation of the original series. And I think it was first mentioned in 1970, exactly 20 years after this story. So, they live in this happy life home. And they're starting to wonder if something, the parents are starting to wonder if something is wrong with the children, because the children over the last few months have been obsessed with creating an African veldt in the nursery. A veldt is a grassland. So they keep creating this veldt with some trees, but mainly just a grassland with hot sun, and lions feeding in the distance. So the parents keep hearing these roars, and sometimes they hear screams coming from the nursery, and they go in and they find these lions off in the distance, and it's all very real and very scary. Now, one of the things about this nursery is that it's built so that it cannot do any harm to humans. However, there is a point in the text where George and Lydia are talking about their son Peter and how brilliant he is at kind of hacking into the controls of the house. And they start to become scared throughout the story that maybe the room actually can hurt them. In fact, they even find at one point a couple of their personal belongings, a wallet and a scarf, that have been taken into the nursery, obviously by the children, and have been chewed on and drooled on, probably by these lions. You can kind of get a sense of where this is going. I'm not going to spoil the end. I kind of assume that most of you that are watching this as sci-fi buffs have read this. It's one of the most popular short stories in all of science fiction. But I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to stop there. What I did want to do is talk a little bit about the theme that is so strong, so prevalent throughout this entire story. And that's the idea of technology and how it relates to us being spoiled as people. I find Ray Bradbury to be an incredibly interesting writer. He was probably, after H.G. Wells, I think he was one of the first sci-fi writers that I ever read. And he kind of branches into the horror genre, so I read him much earlier than I did a lot of other sci-fi writers. And unlike Clarke and Asimov, who kind of bring an awe and a love and an excitement into technology in their science fiction, Bradbury, he has done that at points, but a lot of the time I find that Ray Bradbury is looking at science and technology in a way of how it will hurt us as we continue on. He's unique as a science fiction writer because he creates a nostalgia in his prose, kind of like Clifford Simak does. But then this nostalgia is broken by a technology that is harming the human race. And we see that in spades in this story. Technology kind of becomes a tormentor more than a something that enhances our lives. So in this particular story, the house is the antagonist, which I find really interesting. I talked about this in my top 10 horror, but I really like the idea of house as character in literature, and we see that in stories like The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, The Shining by Stephen King, and here as well, the house plays a massive role as a character in this story. My camera died, so I had to wait a bit and set it back up. But yeah, I just said that in this particular story's case, the house is the antagonist, and what it's doing is taking the place of the parents. It is so technologically advanced that it is starting to do all the things that parents should do. The one that sticks out the most to me is that the house rocks the children to sleep, but also the parents to sleep. So the beds rock in order to make people fall asleep quicker. I like when I read science fiction to see how it imagines the future, but also I enjoy seeing how kind of bias blinded a lot of these writers. In this specific case, I always found it humorous that Ray Bradbury was able to look into the future and see this amazing technological home. He was able to come up with the concept of virtual reality in 1950, but he couldn't imagine a woman being anything else other than a housewife. The Lydia at one point says the house is taking over my job as homemaker and mother, and I don't know what to do with myself. The concept that she could go look for work doesn't even appear to her or in Ray Bradbury's mind. It's interesting how the ideology of our times can bias us so strongly that we can't really imagine the future in specific areas. So that 50s sexism is pretty strong in this story. The Hadleys are spoiled. That is the biggest theme in this story. The Hadleys are spoiled. The story came out in 1950, right when TVs were starting to make their way into Americans' homes. And this is, I think, Ray Bradbury's reaction to TV. I can imagine him looking at the TV, seeing the power that the TV would hold over individuals, and then imagining how technology would advance the TV as time went on. And that's what eventually led him to the concept of virtual reality. So Bradbury obviously in this story tips his hand towards the concept that the house is bad, the nursery is bad, right? This level of technology is bad. And I don't think all writers would have gone that way. I could see other writers showing how amazing this technology is. John W. Campbell's story in the Science Fiction Hall of Fame shows an automated cities that are continuing to run once humanity is almost completely died out, and they're absolutely beautiful cities. And obviously the writer is asking us to be in awe of them. In this case, Bradbury's asking us the opposite, to be terrified of them, because of how spoiled the Hadleys are, especially their children, Peter and Wendy. But one thing that I love about this story is that the theme of technology spoiling us, even though Bradbury's kind of bias is asking us to dislike that idea, it forces us to consider technology and being spoiled and what it means over kind of all time, right? Are we spoiled by technology now? I'm part of Generation X. I've watched a generation, the millennials, grow up, being right on the cusp of the amazing technological advances the internet and smartphones have given us. And then I've raised my daughter, who's part of Generation Z, watching her grow up with all these things existing from her birth on. And we even see stuff like the boomers versus the millennial fight, which I think was the first two generations to go at each other on the internet. We see this kind of fight occurring over whether or not millennials are spoiled because of technology. And this is an interesting concept to me because no matter what era in time you look at, there's a generation fighting another generation. My grandparents thought I was spoiled. I'm sure many of your grandparents thought you were spoiled. And if we go back to your grandparents or our grandparents, their grandparents probably thought they were spoiled. And we can go back all the way to probably the first caveman that used a tool to skin an animal, probably had his grandpa standing in the back saying, "Oh my gosh, you're so spoiled. We did this with our bare hands in my day," right? This goes all the way back. And when we look at it in that scope, the question becomes, how much technology is too much technology? And that is a sliding scale, right? That is, there's technology on one side, no technology on the other side, and each person individually decides where the slider goes to being too much technology. There's a line in this story that I absolutely love where Peter is fighting with his dad over shutting down the nursery, and his dad and Peter says, "I hated it when you turned off the automatic picture painter." And his dad said, "Well, I wanted you to paint your own pictures." And I love this idea of a painting machine that just paints what you see in your head. As an artist, the ability to take out the translation of trying to use your arms or your hands or whatever you use for your art and just instantly have it do what you see in your brain on paper is incredible. But Peter says, "I don't like to paint my own pictures." And he specifically says, let me make sure I'm doing this right. Peter only wants to look, listen, and smell. That's what he says. "I just want to look and listen and smell," right? There's nothing lazier a concept than "I just want to lay down and look and listen and smell," right? All the things in his brain become the things outside of him, and he just wants to experience those things. And the question beyond the insane ending, is Peter wrong for that? Is he wrong for wanting to enjoy the technology that his era has to offer? We see it all the time with phones, right? Where people will talk about how phones are destroying us and so on and so forth. And whatever our personal opinion on that is it wrong for us to use the phones to their highest technological standards? I don't have an answer to this. I don't know when too much technology exists. I know that they're making huge advancements in medical science that will allow robots to invade our bloodstream, unclog our arteries, and all of that seems incredible to me. I have a tendency to love tech. But is there a line? Is there a line for too much tech? And I think that's the question that is really being asked in this story. And I think that's what makes it such a brilliant story, because we all enjoy the story, love the twist end, or the scary end, we'll say, and then our eyes turn on ourselves and we wonder, with the tech of our time, are we spoiled? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think it's a great topic to talk about. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you like content like this, please click subscribe. And thank you very much for watching.